नमस्ते मित्रों, मैं रेखा राजवंशी सिडनी ऑस्ट्रेलिया से आप सबका विश्वरंग ऑस्ट्रेलिया में हार्दिक स्वागत करती हूँ। तो जैसे हमारी भारतीय परंपरा है, हम गणेश जी की स्तुति से और श्लोक वाचन के साथ दीप प्रज्वलित करते हैं। तो मैं आप सबका स्वागत करती हूँ और दीप प्रज्वलित करके एक श्लोक पाठ के द्वारा विश्वरंग ऑस्ट्रेलिया का प्रारंभ करती हूँ। शुभम करोति कल्याणम आरोग्यम धन संपदाम शत्रु बुद्धि विनाशाय दीप ज्योतिर नमोस्तुते। तो मित्रों, ऑस्ट्रेलिया के ट्रेडिशन के हिसाब से मैं आप सबका स्वागत करना चाहूंगी। आई एम रेखा राजवंशी, विश्वरंग ऑस्ट्रेलिया फेस्टिवल डायरेक्टर। I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on today. I pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. मित्रों, इसी के साथ चलिए हम चलें मकवारी यूनिवर्सिटी, जहां पर रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर की मूर्ति स्थापित है।
I welcome you all to Australia Vishwarang Tagore International Festival of Literature and Arts 2020, a part of Global Vishwarang. I thank Mr. Santosh Swami, the Chancellor of Rabindranath Tagore University, for making us a part of the festival. I am delighted to inform you that Vishwarang Australia this year has 20 panels from 6 states of Australia with over 80 plus panelists. I thank all the academicians, university professors, Hindi, English and Urdu authors, musicians, dancers, filmmakers, drama actors, fine arts and performing artists for being a part of it. The virtual festival will take place on 6th, 7th and 8th November from 5 to 8 p.m. Australia time. Please watch us. I thank all our dignitaries who have sent their good wishes to us. And I have Indraneel here, Indraneel Holder, who comes from Bengal, and we are in front of Tagore statue at Macquarie University. I will ask him to say a few words.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Tagore has been a part of our life in Calcutta. I was there for more than 20 years. And Tagore actually plays a very significant role to understand our own individual role in the society. And he has championed that education and that particular experience that we need to grow up as a human being across the whole world. His examples, his cultural understanding and his writing capabilities have always been a part of our, even today is a part of our most exclusive education system. I wish all of you a wonderful time in this particular event and enjoy and cultivate the culture that you are actually experiencing with Tagore. Namaskar.
Namaste.
Namaskar, Adab. I am absolutely delighted today to participate in this program connected with Vishwarang 2020. Vishwa means the world, Rang means colors. It is self-explanatory, bringing the two together. Our world is one, but we are united by common love for culture and common love for the arts. And each of our countries, each of our very specific societies brings with it a very, very special flavor to create this global cultural process. It enriches each one of us. It enriches society. I wonder what the world would be without culture. These are very special times, and we find ourselves sometimes isolated and cut off from each other during this pandemic period. But at the same time, we have found other ways to communicate, to be closer together. And I'm very, very happy that the organizers of Vishwarang 2020 have found this way of keeping us together, to bring together the best of literature and arts from English language, from Hindi, from Urdu, perhaps from other languages as well. And I'm also delighted that this gives us a chance to reflect on India-Australia relations. This is a very, very special period. हमारे दोनों देशों के बीच ताल्लुकात जो हैं और मजबूत हों, और अभी तारीखी रिश्ते हैं हमारे देशों के बीच में, हमारे ममालिक के दरमियान, तो मैं चाहूँगा कि और मजबूत हों और मुस्तहकम हो। इस मौके पर मैं आप सबको मुबारकबाद देना चाहता हूँ कि भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया जो हैं, हमारे बीच में जो रिश्ते हैं बहुत ही स्पेशल हैं, बहुत ही इस तरह से हैं, करीबी रिश्ते हैं। तो जो आप लोग कर रहे हैं इस प्रोग्राम के ज़रिए, मैं कहूँगा कि इससे हम लोग सबको और करीब आने का मौका मिलेगा, और मैं आप सबको मुबारकबाद देना चाहता हूँ और शुक्रिया भी कहना चाहता हूँ। और क्योंकि हम लोग दिवाली के करीब हैं, तो दिवाली के अवसर पर भी इस मौके पर आप सबको मैं बधाई देता हूँ, और मैं ये कहना चाहूँगा कि आप लोग सब सेहतमंद रहें और आपका स्वास्थ्य बना रहे, और हम लोग एक बार फिर संस्कृति के माध्यम से अपने जो फन और जो आर्ट के माध्यम से हम लोग एक दूसरे के करीब आ जाएं, और ऐसा सिलसिला चलता रहे, और भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के रिश्ते और भी मजबूत हो जाएं आने के मुस्तकबिल में। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
नमस्ते, मेरा नाम Julian है, मैं बरारा लोकसभा क्षेत्र का सांसद हूँ. मैं Parliamentary Friends of India का अध्यक्ष भी हूँ. Hello, my name's Julian Leeser. I'm the federal member for Barara and I'm the chair of the Parliamentary Friends of India. You know, the Australia-India relationship is so important. Over the last few years, we've seen it bloom and grow, particularly where both countries are focused on what we can do to burnish that relationship further. In Australia, obviously, we've produced the Varghese report, which focused on 10 sectors and 10 states. In India, Ambassador Anil Vadva is preparing a companion report through the Confederation of Indian Industries. And of course, recently this year, we had the Virtual Leaders Summit where Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Morrison came together to take our relationship to the next stage. At the same time, both countries are now represented by some of the most senior people in their lands as High Commissioners. Gitesh Sarma, the High Commissioner from India to Australia, is one of the most senior bureaucrats ever sent to Australia by the Ministry of External Affairs, a former Secretary West, a distinguished diplomat with years of experience, particularly in Russia and the former Soviet Union. And of course, the Australian High Commissioner to India is Barry O'Farrell, a person well known to Australians for being the former Premier of New South Wales and one of the first Australian politicians to see the importance of the relationship. What's changed this relationship has been the growing changes in the geostrategic environment. We in the Indo-Pacific region have recognised the importance of countries that share values, countries that share a destiny, countries that believe in the rules-based international order and the rule of law coming together to work together. Today you're focused on an aspect of the relationship we perhaps don't often talk about enough, and that is the exchange of culture, particularly art and literature. I know from my own family how the introduction to India that my wife got was through people like Vikram Seth and V.S. Naipur. It was reading their works that inspired her to want to travel to India as a student, and then her absolute love affair with India was transmitted to me because she just kept talking about what an incredible place it was, and we ended up honeymooning there. One of the things that I think is beautiful about Australia and our multicultural community is the opportunity to sample Indian music, Indian art, Indian literature so freely and readily here from the wonderful 700,000 Indian diaspora that makes our country great and makes it what it is. So I want to encourage you in the work that you're doing in relation to culture, in relation to literature, in relation to art, to share the culture, literature and art of both countries. India's tradition is much older and much better established, but Australia's new tradition, a great tradition that is an amalgam of different cultures with an Australian thread running through it, is, I think, something that's worthy of investigation as well. Thank you so much for allowing me to say a few words, and let me particularly pay tribute to Rekha for all of the great work that she has done. Namaste. Dhanyavad.
Hi everyone, I'm Jodi Mckay and I'm the member for Strathfield. I'm also the leader of the opposition in New South Wales, and I want to wish everyone the very best for Vishwarang 2020. Vishwarang 2020 brings together so many people to celebrate Indian art, culture and literature. I think everyone who knows me knows that I am very passionate about art, culture and literature, and all things, in fact, that bring the countries of India and Australia closer together. I think it's incredibly important that despite COVID-19, this event is still occurring. So can I wish everyone the very best for Vishwarang 2020, and I hope to see you all very, very soon.
Friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to Ms. Rekha Rajvanshi, Festival Director of Vishwarang 2020 Australia, for inviting me to this event, and it's an honor for me to be part of this event. I congratulate to Rabindranath Tagore University for organizing Vishwarang 2020, which is here to celebrate the essence of arts, literature, science and culture. I am happy to note that Vishwarang 2019 festival was a huge success with more than 1,000 artists' participation from 30 countries, and I hope Vishwarang 2020 will have wider participation compared to previous year. Festivals similar to this always celebrate the spirit of friendship and strengthen the ties. It is heartening to see that this year Australia, and especially from Melbourne, art and literary personalities are participating and bonding and deepening these relationships to the next level. Cultural diplomacy is one of the strong pillars of diplomacy. It not only boosts the social cultural cooperation but also promote the national interest of participating countries alongside and paves the way for other international relations to follow. I wish such programs take place more often. With this, once again, I like to convey my sincere thanks for giving me this opportunity to participate in this important event, and I wish every success to the event and all the very best to you and all the participants. Please stay safe and healthy. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Hello everyone, and on behalf of Indian Link Media Group, I want to congratulate Tagore University for this initiative, Vishwarang, which celebrates arts, literature, science, and culture. More importantly, this is being celebrated in 15 plus countries: the United States, Canada, UK, Russia, Netherlands, Singapore, and also where I am today, Australia. I know the next 3 days are going to be filled with sounds, sights, and discussions from our various community members in Australia. They will take you through the various aspects of arts and culture of a community down under in Australia. And I'm confident it'll be a fascinating 3 days. But what I want to talk to you more is about Australia-India relationship and why having a strong diaspora to share Indian culture is important for a flourishing relationship between the two countries. The relationship between countries is set on various platforms. These can be political, trade, business, cultural, sports, military, etc. But underlying all these is the people-to-people connection. In fact, in an Australian white paper by former Secretary of DFAT, Peter Varghese, on strategies to do business with India, the emphasis was on the people-to-people relationship being one of the major drivers to closer relationship between India and Australia. The report stated that the 750,000 strong Indian diaspora in Australia makes a significant contribution to Australia's society and economy. It is also expected that the Indian-born Australians will outnumber Chinese-born Australians by 2031, reaching 1.4 million. Yet in spite of the strong growth of the Indian diaspora, we can best describe the relationship between our two countries as lukewarm. In trade, in spite of acknowledging that it is important for Australia to be a part of India's growth story as the 1 billion plus population wakes to global opportunities, cultural ties between the two countries are not as strong as they can be. But there are green shoots emerging. Now let's look at this through a wider prism. But just before starting, brief introduction to myself. My name is Pawan Luthra, and I'm the CEO of the Indian Link Media Group here in Australia. Indian Link printed its first newspaper in 1994, and this month we enter our 27th year in the media business. Our story follows the journey of the Indian-Australian community in Australia. As the numbers have increased and the type of migrants coming to Australia has changed, we have reached out to them in various ways. We expanded into a 24/7 Indian radio station in 2002, and then moved on to social media with a website, weekly emails, and also we use other platforms like Instagram, Twitter, etc. Through our various channels, we connect the community and share with them stories and issues of Indian-Australian interest. In fact, of the 750,000 people of Indian origin in Australia, Indian Link connects with at least 70% in one form or the other. We see our job as observing the connection between the diaspora and their adopted land, and by default, happenings between India and Australia. My media career in this country has been built by observing these links very closely. But now let me start with a macro view. The India-Australia relationship. I think it's a very relevant topic of great significance because the relationship between India and Australia has been defined by stops and starts, and this is sad because there's so much promise there. There is opportunities for some wonderful work to come out of collaborative exercises, and this potential is not being realized. In analyzing where the stumbling blocks are, perhaps it's time to go back to the drawing board and to understand how the two nations perceive each other. India's current relationship with Australia has come a long way from where it was before 2014. Prior to that, it had been built on a rubble of political mistrust, diplomatic disruption, and media misinterpretation. India-Australia relationships have always been a confusing enigma, sometimes cordial, often hostile, and occasionally tolerant. The relationship has weathered many storms in the past 2 decades. Currently, the waters are smooth and bonds are developing in yet another unexplored area, defense ties. And if you're a news junkie, and I suspect you would be, you would know the pivotal moment came when the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Australia in 2014. Australia is still surprised at the rockstar reception he received. Most Australian politicians would give an arm and a leg for that kind of an adulation. Prior to this, and of course another pivotal moment was way back in 1998, when India became a nuclear power, Australia went ballistic in its condemnation, a stance that has softened over the years. But let's take a step back and go back to the historical perspective. The India-Australia relationship began many, many years ago. Is dream time old enough? According to the US study, there is an evidence of a substantial genetic flow from India to Australia, estimated at slightly over 4,000 years ago, a time when changes in tool technology and fruit processing appear in the Australian archaeological record, suggesting that these may be related. So perhaps that was the first evidence of trade between the two continents. But of course, our ties that's between India and Australia go even further back to Gondwana land. As a new Australian, I'm fascinated by the anthropological evidence that connects my people to the first Australians. We have a large indigenous tribe in India whose traditional art is dot painting. They are well adjusted in the mainstream now, but they have a strong connection to their forest homes. Their tribe name is Gond. The term Gondwana is Sanskrit for the forest of the Gonds. Is this a coincidence? Who knows? In modern Australia, the earliest Indians came from the British Raj. The ships of the First Fleet arrived in Australia in 1788. the Rajasthan. The name of the ship was the Rajasthan, was a ship that made 2 voyages from England to South Australia between 1938 and 1940. And guess where the ship was made? It was made in India. Another ship that came also to South Australia in 1845 was named after its builders, Rustomji, after Hirji Bhoi Rustomji Patel. The Ganga traveled from Liverpool to Adelaide in 1846. Ganga is, of course, the Indian word for the Ganges, a sacred river. Another ship was the Sydney Cove, which was shipwrecked on the east coast of Australia. The shipwrecked crew took a long boat and then a long trek from Tasmania to Sydney, and that was possibly the times that we realized that the Indian had been coming to Australia from the time of the first fleet. Over time, as more ships came to Australia, they stopped by India to pick up supplies and the British Raj officers who were posted to Australia. The British Raj officers also brought many Indian links. Indian architecture, they found, was better suited to Australian conditions than European. So they gave Australia Hindi words like veranda and bungalow. They also formed new townships here and named them after the Indian towns that grown to love. In Australia, we have a place called Mangalore. We have Lucknow, very familiar Indian city names, but we actually have them in Australia, courtesy of the British Raj officers who traveled to Australia about 100 years ago. In the early colonies, Indians were brought to Australia as laborers and domestic workers, with the first Indians arriving in Australia with the British who had been living in India. Indians, Sikhs, Afghanis, Pacific Islanders were recruited to work in the rural and outback. Many stayed on after they came here just to work, and they got along well with the local community. They fought in the world wars as Australians. There's much information these days about the help that the Australian soldiers got from Indian soldiers who were sent out from India in support. But light is also being shed on the Sikh Australian soldiers who fought alongside the Australian brothers in the 2 world wars. Now, with the abolition of the White Australia policy in the 1960s, professionals came to Australia in large numbers, mostly doctors and academics. They looked different to the local Australians, but they adopted the ways of the mainstream society. At the start of this century, it was the coming of the Indian students that clearly rankled. They came from a new India, one that is more confident and very proud of its soft culture. And the young ambassadors here did not shy away from expressing it, even as they worked hard in their 3 to 4 jobs to support themselves. Today, there are 750,000 people of Indian origin living in Australia. India and Australia are rapidly becoming more important to one another. The name of the game is economics and trade, even though the platitudes may be cricket and Commonwealth and defence ties are on the rise behind the scenes. Now I want to circle back to the people-to-people scenes. Let me take you deeper into cricket. Now it's often referred to at a platitude level, and a good-natured laugh goes around as and when it is mentioned. But cricket is a great connector and a great leveler. The rivalry between Australia and India is on par with the passion which comes out at the Ashes. The India-Australia Summer of Cricket expected in the next 3 months will earn Cricket Australia $300 million. Now, if COVID had not intervened, these games would have been attended by thousands of Indians some dressed in Indian traditional and cultural attire with drums and dhols. Bhangra would have been performed in the stands, and as in the previous years, the game of cricket would become an important cultural link between the two countries. Interestingly, a bit of an analysis over here. The current cricket team is one that is that's an Indian cricket team, is the one that has probably learned most from the Australians to be proud of their own talent, to be brash, confident, overconfident, not adverse to sledging. No wonder the Aussie team hates them because they're just like them. But even with this sense of competition during the Indian Premier League, the IPL in India, when the Australian players are all part of the regional teams, the bonds between the sporting leaders get strengthened. IPL is a great example of how increased exposure to those different from us bring in greater awareness and tolerance, and perhaps even a greater sense of camaraderie as we work towards a common goal. Within cricket, there have been great relationships built, such as Steve Waugh, who has been upfront about his passion for India. Now, these relationships have led to greater business and charitable links. Now, food, another great platitude, is much more than that. Indian food practices are increasingly getting adopted in Australia because of the vegan and vegetarian trends. If the way to expand and showcase one's culture is through food, Indian diaspora in Australia is doing very well. Not only have the number of Indian food outlets expanded strongly across Australia, but also the food on offer is from all parts of India. It is not uncommon to come across Australian friends who rave about the dosa or the explosion of flavors in the papri chaat. More so, in some top-rated TV shows such as MasterChef, it is not uncommon to see an Indian competitor. Finding frozen samosas at the local supermarket shows how much has food captured the culinary, cultural landscape of Australia. Films, obviously Bollywood, has allowed a part of India to reach into the local culture. Having local cinema halls have regular screenings of Bollywood movies and their websites having a special tab for these movies is a vindication of how well has this culture emerged. Through movies like Lion and Slumdog Millionaire, though they tend to attract more viewers from the mainstream to this aspect of Indian culture, the advent of streaming services such as Netflix and Amazon Prime has allowed many to see the more traditional Bollywood films in the privacy of their own homes. The well-known Indian Film Festival in Melbourne has also gone a long way in building up more awareness and increasing understanding. Corporate Bollywood parties, though cliched, seem to hit the mark, and though some purists may scowl at calling Bollywood culture, but it is unique to India. Yoga. This ancient Indian art has gained more acceptance in the mainstream over the last few years, especially as there has been a push by the Indian government to show this aspect of the Indian culture. Writers' festivals. In pre-COVID times, the Sydney and Melbourne Writers' Festival had writers like Shashi Tharoor, William Dalrymple, Salman Rushdie, Arundhati Roy. They found their way down under. As ambassadors of Indian art and culture, they contribute admirably to the local social fabric. So in summary, there is a growing awareness of Indian culture in Australia for which the Indian community must take credit. With little funding and a lot of passion, they do an amazing job to present all these different opportunities to connect. But what we do need more is a diaspora to take greater part either as artists and performers, or as volunteers and organizers, or just pure visitors to the various arts and cultural shows in Australia. Make your presence known, learn, interact, enjoy. A conversation will only happen when both parties understand and appreciate each other. What we can do on a personal level to increase cultural ties: number one, we must do our jobs well. Australia knows of us as good doctors, software engineers, university academics, scientific researchers, good students, as good service providers as nurses and taxi drivers and petrol pump attendants. Let them know of us as good writers, artists, entrepreneurs, administrators, CEOs. We must practice our faith well. Our Sikh brothers and sisters have shown us the way here. With their seva during the bushfires, floods, and COVID-caused isolation, they have raised the stature of the community in the eyes of Australians. We must engage with mainstream Australia of all other backgrounds. We must be inclusive and involve them in our activities and endeavors. It would have been wonderful to have more Australian participation in festivals such as Vishwarang. Now I wish you all a fantastic 3 days ahead, and may you enjoy the cultural immersion you're going to be getting into. Have a wonderful 3 days.